Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We are Turnitin, and today we come to you with the topic Navigating the Future, Innovation and Integrity in the Age of AI. This is supposed to say. So we're just going to go to the next slide. The session is going to be 45 minutes long. 30 minutes will be presentation, and then 15 minutes will be Q&A. In the Q&A, you can ask me any types of questions. The session itself will be thought leadership, so there's not going to be product demonstration or any product-specific information. Should you have product-specific questions, you can ask them in the Q&A or catch me after the session as well. We also have a table at the entrance directly on the right side of the conference hall. You can find us there as well. Happy to give you a demonstration or any more information, but today's session is not about a product. I said this many times as you were coming in. Feel free to grab a goodie bag or maybe even two. There's a lovely notebook in there. There's 2 pens in there, and the bag itself is very practical as well. We brought loads, and people are not grabbing them as much as we would have hoped, so we've got plenty left over. Feel free to grab as many as you want. Okay, with that, who am I and why am I talking to you? My name is Divya Lorenz. I'm a solutions engineer at Turnitin. I work very closely with the product, hence the comment about the product. I know the product very well, but I'm not going to present it to you today. So that's just part of why I'm here, because I am so involved with the product and the customers. I've been with Turnitin for 4 years now. Yeah, and basically that's why I'm here. Now, quick question to you, and if you don't mind, the session is going to be slightly interactive. I'll ask a couple of questions here and there. You can participate as much as you want. They're not going to be difficult questions, but if you do want to interact, I would be very happy. So first question, do you know Turnitin? And if so, please raise your hand. That's a majority. Perfect. Okay. For those that don't know Turnitin, or maybe you do know, but you know wrong information, we are known as a plagiarism checker. So we basically check written work for similarity. We are known as a plagiarism checker. We don't usually try to sell ourselves as a plagiarism checker because we don't really check for plagiarism. We check for similarity. Huge difference there. But obviously, people understand very easily what we mean when we say we check for plagiarism. So that's just that. Okay. Like I said, this session won't be focused on products, but they will be focused on a global survey. So as Turnitin, we need to understand the market that we are working in. We need to understand our customers. We need to understand education in order to cater to exactly our customers and what the market needs. In order to do that, we have surveyed globally different institutions and different types of personas to understand what the market needs, particularly in the age of AI. Okay, this is in partnership with Vanson and Byrne. They have helped us create this global survey. And it helps us to adapt products if needed, basically. That's why we need to be in touch with these kinds of audiences. One thing I will say, just a quick disclaimer before we go into any more depth of this survey and its findings, these are trends and not rules, okay? So we have surveyed many, many people, and the percentages that I'll show you are trends, and they are meant to reflect the overall market. There are always going to be exceptions, okay? It's just statistics, basically. If you are really interested in the global survey, at the end of the session, there's going to be a last slide with a QR code. That QR code you can scan with your phone, and then you have access to the full survey. So if you want any more detail, if you want to share it maybe with your institution after the session, feel free to scan that QR code and take and download the report, okay? Now, who have we surveyed? We have surveyed 3,500 individuals. These are academic administrators, educators, and students, and this is across sec ed and higher education. So a very broad amount of people. It was a global survey, but we haven't managed to ask every individual from every country. So the countries that we did survey were the US, Australia and New Zealand, UK and Ireland, Mexico, and India. Okay, just to give you a bit of background there. In terms of the breakdown of those 3,500 people that we have surveyed, 500 of those were educators, and again, split between sec ed and higher education. 500 were academic administrators, and then the rest, the 2,500 that are remaining, were students. Obviously, students had to be asked in a higher proportion because Turnitin tends to have more students than educators, by sheer logic. That's how education works. So obviously that is why we have a much larger number of students in that survey, and they were from higher education. Okay. Now, in terms of the institutions that we have reached out and surveyed, they were ranging in size. They were as little, I shouldn't say little, sorry. They were as small as 100 employees to as big as to over 5,000 employees. So very different kind of backgrounds of institutions. And like I said, these are the countries where we had the respondents from. Okay. Okay. Oh, this slide is technically wrong, but it's okay. This is the first question I want to ask you as well. So we have found, and we technically always have this situation, that institutions are facing lots and lots of different challenges at the moment. Now, you are in education yourselves. Maybe you want to give me some keywords, shout them in if you want, of what challenges you think these are. Don't be shy. I know we're tired as well. Just one word will suffice. Recruitment. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
We're not doing enough of it.
In terms of students or education?
Students.
Wow, okay. We need more students. Interesting. Lovely. Say again? Yeah, well, that's a different conversation altogether. Okay, perfect. What we have found with our global survey, I'm very sorry, this is an old slide deck actually. This was meant to look a little more nicer, but it's okay. We're going to roll with it. That's okay. What we have found is that there are lots of different challenges. One of them is censorship. As you know, there's always lots of stuff going on in the world. There's political distress. There's lots of different things that are happening, and the social divides are getting slightly larger because of that. That will ultimately impact campus culture. Students are traveling and moving abroad to do their education as well, so things like mental health are going to impact them, inclusion, belonging, that kind of thing. Okay. There's also the balance that institutions need to find where tradition meets the new evolving of just life, which is also difficult. We've got online competitors that are able to provide education much cheaper, which is a huge issue. In yesterday's session, the session took place exactly like this yesterday, finances came up as a big challenge as well. Budgets are things that people are struggling with. We've got raising plagiarism, good old just standard plagiarism, where people are just able to copy and paste content from the internet much more easily. Student needs are evolving, they need more flexibility, they need tech to be integrated into their education, and we are obviously more and more remote in this world as well, and that also has an impact too. And then we've got the star of the show, generative AI. I'm sure you, have you heard of it? Not sure you have. Obviously, students are able to now, at the click of a button, produce content that they can submit as their own work, and that is a huge, huge thing. And that's a huge challenge, and probably the most pressing challenge that institutions are currently facing. Okay, before I go to the next slide, can I ask the room, do you feel positive about the change that generative AI is bringing to the world? If yes, can you raise your hand? Positive? Oh! Okay. We have some people on the fence. Okay, that's fair enough. I personally think it is a positive change on the large. Okay, it comes with challenges, but generally positive. And with me, 78% of our survey respondents agree. They generally think the impact that generative AI or AI in general is having on the world, on pretty much everything, is largely positive. Okay. Now, at the same time, can I again ask the room, do you think that currently in education generative AI is being misused? If yes, can you please raise your hand? Okay, roughly a majority. With you, almost every one of our respondents agree. Okay, 95% out of 3,500 people is a large number, and most of them think that generative AI is being misused at the moment in the education setting. To put it into perspective as well, in not every part of the world, education is the same, right? It's not the same. You can move from one country to another and you will know that education and the systems are very different. In some areas of the world, literal recall is the only type of assessment. So using generative AI in that kind of setting actually isn't too much of a trouble, because we're just hoping to recall information, okay? We're not meant to necessarily produce our own as such. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. I'll take questions at the end, is that okay? Perfect, okay. So another slide, another bit of information. Change is constant, but the release of generative AI has been absolutely huge. It can be compared, and it should be compared to the internet, okay? I wasn't in education at that time, but I have done my research, and basically when the internet came about, the learning experience shifted drastically, because previously it was textbooks and the classroom. Now we had the internet. We can look up content at home, we can read up things at home, we can write documents, all sorts of things, right? Submit via the internet and that kind of stuff. And it is very much the same type of thing, different, same but different, because basically it's the same type of change in terms of volume, okay? What we usually find when technology jumps quite quickly, which technology can do, institutions can't move just as quick, because technology is the press of a button, whereas institutions have years and years and years of traditions, policies, frameworks, that kind of thing. And we can't change them all just like that within a second. ChatGPT, however, was released within basically what to us felt like a second. I'm sure they would not agree with that, but it was released into the world like that, okay? So what we're facing right now is that institutional lag to keep up with the technology. And rightly so, it's not to blame anyone, okay? Who do you think, and I'm going to need answers now, no raising hands, who do you think is more concerned about this change? Is it students or is it educators? Educators. I'm glad you're saying that. It's in fact students. So 64% of students that we have surveyed are worried about the use of AI within education. That is less than educators, because 50% of those that we have surveyed, I'm not speaking for the entire world, of course, are worried about that. So there is a 14% difference, and we have surveyed a lot more students as well. That's something to bear in mind too. And academic administrators are even lower. They are at 41%. Why do you think students are worried about generative AI in education? Jobs? Can you elaborate a little bit? As in, like, they need to find a job where they know how to use AI, or? Okay. Job. Say again?
Displacement.
Yes. Okay, okay. Any other thoughts on that? I couldn't hear it.
Perhaps like it potentially devalues their degree if there's a perception that actually students are using it for an assessment.
Very interesting thought. Yes, absolutely. These are things I didn't have on my list, so I'm glad you said them. I can share my list with you. One of them is proving their innocence. Because if we are going into education and people are writing essays, how can I say, and particularly if we've got AI indicators free of charge on the internet, that might not be that reliable, and they kind of give you a bit of a dodgy result, how can I prove that this is not actually the truth, right? How can I prove my innocence? Also, if I am writing my own paper, but other students in the same cohort are not, who am I competing with? With other students or with ChatGPT potentially, right? Or other generative AI, large language models. Also, if I am doing a degree, I hopefully would think that students are interested in that topic, they want to learn about it, and they want ultimately to have a qualification at the end of it. Now, with time constraints, which not just educators are facing, but also students, they might be shortcutting their own learning because of the convenience of it all. So that too can be a concern for students. Whilst they might be in charge of this themselves, they might still fall into the temptation. And ultimately, they are the ones that are needing guidance right now. They are the ones that are younger, they adapt to technology usually quicker, but they also need to know what is right and what is wrong, and who's going to teach them that? That's the educators. They should be the ones that set the framework and the rules and all of that kind of stuff so that they know how to use it. 2 weeks ago, I was at LearnTech in Karlsruhe, and I had lots of really good conversations with a lot of students, and it was so interesting. The way they are using AI is very different to what I expected. Some of them are using it just to proofread their papers, and proofreading should not be, I'm putting in a couple of bullet points and Grammarly is going to write it for me. That's not proofreading. We need to be clear on that, okay? Proofreading is, I am writing a paper and I'll put it into a large language model and I say, please can you take this and proofread it and potentially mark the areas that you have adapted, so that I know that my original thoughts are still the same. Okay, so that everything basically is the way I left it, just a little improved in terms of grammar and that kind of stuff. I am originally from Germany, but I live in the UK and I've studied in the UK, sort of. I don't have a degree, fun fact. But I did do a diploma, and I had to write a couple of papers. And when I first had to do that, first of all, I didn't study in Germany, so writing papers initially was already a challenge. And then secondly, in my second language that I then wasn't fluent in. The first assessment I handed in, my instructor pulled me to the side and said, we need to talk about this a little bit. Do you have anyone who could proofread your paper for you? Now, when you just move to a new country, you might not have people whose mother language is English or who are very good at it and who can proofread an entire paper for you and give you feedback on it. Large language models can do that. So it is a huge tool for students from all different backgrounds to use for that kind of thing, okay? Also, ChatGPT or other large language models are awake 24/7. They're available immediately, and if I need any type of support as a student, it's going to be there. I can ask for feedback, I can ask for tutoring. I can basically tell the model to treat me like I'm their student and they are my tutor, and they are going to give me some feedback on the stuff I've been writing, okay? Which is huge, because as a tutor, I can't be awake at 2 a.m. when my students are and respond to every single email that is coming in, right? So it's a huge tool, and that's one of the ways I've learned they are using it, which is great. Also, personal experience as well, mental health support, right? If you are really struggling with something in that moment and you don't want to, I don't know, take a phone call, speak to someone who might not be up for it right now, any type of thing, you can actually speak to this machine and there's going to be some really good support and help coming through. And I might want to ask it for next steps in my learning process. So ChatGPT and the like, I had to say that yesterday as well. I always refer to ChatGPT, I mean generative AI. We are not being sponsored. It is just the tool that I prefer to use the most. So they can be incredible tools for students to use. We just need to tell them how and what is the right way to use it, okay? Who do you think is responsible for that? For telling them how to use it responsibly? Educators, yeah. That's very detailed, okay. From the respondents that we have from our survey, 86% have said it's the institution's responsibility. So ultimately, we need institutions to potentially write AI policies, AI frameworks, yeah? So that the educators have someone to turn to as well, because we've got students that need guidance, but so do the educators. Initially, when I asked you who do you think is most worried about generative AI, your response was educators, probably for that reason, because they are the ones asked for support. Who are they asking for support, right? There are changes in the world. There is the AI Act, for example, in the EU. There's things like that happening, but we were talking about an institutional lag. ChatGPT was released in April 2023. That act is taking place, or taking force, I think you say it like that, in 2026, August. So there's a over 2-year gap between those two things, yeah? So that's just one thing to bear in mind. We are in this situation where everyone is trying to turn to someone for support, and we all need that support, okay? Right, okay. One thing I want you to take away as well is that 94% of our respondents report that their institution is already doing something about AI. There might be some emails coming through saying we do encourage you to use it for this, that, and this, but there might not be exact guidance as such, right? One thing that is important to note is that AI, generative AI, or general AI, I guess, and academic integrity can coexist. The examples I've given just a minute ago are very much examples where students have used it in a way that is meaningful to their learning, and it doesn't interrupt their learning. So there are definitely ways, shapes and forms in which these two things can be incorporated. And ultimately that's what we should be doing, because you were talking about employment earlier. I misunderstood you slightly, but what is going to happen is that students who are studying now will enter the workforce where they are expected to use AI. They are supposed to be AI literate. They are supposed to know what is right and what is wrong when it comes to the use of AI. Where are they going to learn this? Best case scenario, whilst they're in education, okay? So that's just something to take away as well. One big question is, are the assessment methods that we are using still up to date? Are they going with the time? If we can outsource essay writing at the press of a button, maybe it's not about how well a student can write an essay, maybe it's more about how much they can critically think. So for example, a way we can restructure that essay type of assessment is have them prompt 2 different large language models with 2 different questions, or in multiple different ways. Let them produce text, content, and then they are the ones that put their own spin on it. So they're basically saying, ChatGPT gave me this answer, Gemini gave me this answer. My personal opinion after reading all of that is this, okay? So critical thinking, that's the one thing that is a human trait that ChatGPT can't have. It doesn't have an opinion, humans do, okay? See some raised eyebrows. I know it's a controversial thing, but the human isn't replaceable. Okay, that's basically the idea. So critical thinking remains a skill that is future-proof and that we need to teach students. How many words they can write might not be as relevant anymore. Okay.
Sorry, to interrupt. If I get 2 forms of Gen AI to give me whatever you just talked about,
Yes.
I can equally then type in, please help me, please provide the text to critically evaluate those 2 forms of AI. So I'm not quite sure where you're basically saying be honest in this way, but actually it's very easy to basically navigate the system because it will do whatever you want it to do.
Yes and no. You can't really ask it to have an opinion as such, and what you can't ask it either is to defend that opinion in a conversation with the educator, for example. Right? So the question is more, is the writing of words, just putting out a certain limit of words, still going with the time, or do we need to actually hear students' voices more clearly so that we don't confuse it with ChatGPT or the like? Okay? But I'll take more of that discussion at the end of this. I've only got 4 minutes left, so I need to quickly go through the rest of this. I will just quickly give you some more background on the respondents' profiles that we had, just so that you are aware who exactly these ideas are coming from. The countries we've been through, you can see them here, USA, UK and Ireland, and so on. Respondent type, we've got the admins, the educators and the students, and then the generation is also important, okay? So currently, the most people in education is Gen Z, and they are the majority of respondents for that reason. But we also have our millennials, we've got Generation X, baby boomers, silent generation, we only had 2 submissions, as you can see here, and then we also had 133 that prefer not to say their age, okay? So that's just so that you are aware whose ideas these are that we were sharing. In terms of the types of institutions and sizes and departments, one thing I just want you to take away is that in terms of the department, it was predominantly admin, academic affairs, and faculty that were responding to our survey. Institution size, the majority were between 500 and 1,000 employees, but we had pretty much almost an equal spread between all of the different sizes, and then an equal spread between sec ed and higher ed, and then full-time students were the majority, and then we had a small amount of part-time students in there as well. Okay. Before we go into the Q&A, I just want to leave you with a couple of quotes here as well. A student quote is, if students are taught to make good use of this intelligence without considering it as cheating, it will be possible to improve understanding and find new ways of learning. Emphasis on find new ways of learning, okay? Because ultimately writing an essay might not be the way we learn best in this day and age anymore, okay? I've got nothing personally against the essay, by the way. It's a great tool. It's just that we can outsource it very easily nowadays. We need the human touch always. Interesting. I know we might or might not agree whether ChatGPT and the like can critically think. However, asking AI whether they can exist without humans is basically a no. We need the human to prompt, we need the human to maintain the electricity, the service, and all that kind of stuff. The other way around, it doesn't work, right? So humans have created AI and we can exist without it. AI can't really, unless we are in science fiction, exist without AI. That's my personal opinion. I think a lot of people share it, and I think it might be scientific fact, but I've never studied AI, so I can't really tell you for sure, but I'm pretty sure on this. My gut feeling tells me this. Because students are preparing for the future of work and the use of AI in the workplace is growing, so it is important for them to learn it, right? So that's also one big takeaway. We don't want to penalize the use of AI or completely prohibit it. We need to incorporate it into education and find ways of how we can do that without producing an environment of misconduct, okay? So I will leave you with this one last question. You can give an answer now, but you don't have to. And it's basically, how will you rise to this opportunity? It is a huge opportunity. We are at a, how do you call it? When you're at a road that has two endings? Crossroads. Perfect, yes. We are at a crossroad, okay? And it's a huge thing to be in this right now in education, and I think it's very exciting, okay? If you have any thoughts now, feel free to share. Otherwise, with 44 seconds left, here is the promised QR code to the entire global survey. Feel free to download it. And thank you so much for coming here after lunch. I'm sure you're all tired and you've had lots and lots of sessions to attend. So thank you for choosing this one and staying interactive throughout. Thank you so much. And with that, thank you. Thank you, thanks. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any. Comments, concerns?
Are there any answers to the questions that are coming about from today so far? Or where are we at the moment with the thinking around assessments?
I've heard lots of different ideas in regards to that. There's a lot of people that say what we might need to move towards is the verbal assessment after the writing of an essay. So just sort of like quickly double check with the students, they know what they've submitted, they can fight that case that they've created. Other people are also saying it's probably not sustainable to do a verbal assessment for every single written piece of work that students have to submit. We also, of course, have technology that can help with the detection of AI writing. Turnitin is one of them, in case you're curious. And we are also releasing a new product where we are moving from detection as an aftermath to proof of process, so that we are basically there with the student, almost like an invigilation tool, but not really, where they basically can prove their innocence very easily because the writing report is being produced. So things like low revision, human writing is usually a bit messy. They're writing, they're deleting, they're starting again. Those kinds of things would be highlighted. Copy and paste would be highlighted. We can view a video, which is basically a version history of the writing of that document, where we basically can see exactly what happened. And it's a very easy way for students to show what they've done, the work they've created, and for instructors to fully understand their process. And it might help in future as well to find the ways in which we can support them better, because we understand their writing process a lot better. Yes?
Thank you. Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I think in history, in human history, we always have new developments of technology, new inventions, and always comes with a threat.
It does.
When internet just arrived, it was a little bit similar discussion that we are having now with artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Plagiarism and all these kind of things, of course, they are still present in using internet. But I think I like the idea of deliberately asking our students to use artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And to ask them, okay, this is what AI was produced, now you can critically assess what it was produced. Because in that way we
Absolutely.
embracing that they will use it and try to make some sort of
A thousand percent.
something like that. I think it will be useful for assessment, for so it's a big challenge for the university.
Absolutely, yes.
But I think that's one way to I think to move forward.
Absolutely, yes. We, on our website, have an AI misuse checklist and rubric that you can all download as well, whether or not you're a customer, it doesn't matter, which gives an initial inspiration to how we can set that threshold of what type of AI use is good and encouraged, and where do we go into the levels of misconduct a little bit, because ultimately that's the goal. We need to be able to allow students to use the tools for efficiency, for effectiveness, but obviously not to be replacing their own thinking, their own working towards ultimately their degree or qualification.
So I think in universities maybe we are making the mistake that we are moving too much to the side of penalizing.
Yeah.
And not embracing.
Yes. Yeah.
In our school, I come from Mexico. For academic school, we have a document that says, okay, using AI is equivalent to plagiarism and these kind of things. And I don't know if it's the best way to.
Yeah, no, it's difficult, and there's many institutions that have exactly that problem at the moment. A lot of the times what happens, or what I find happens, is that educators are sort of making it up by themselves with their students. They're giving them the guidance they think is right, and the institution is just kind of like feeling it out. It's going to move from that, I'm sure. There's going to be policies and things like that in place, but for now, it's pretty much the educators who take that responsibility and set those rules. But those are exactly the ones we want to support, of course.
May I ask if there are any institutions who really embrace AI and what the assessment strategies are that seem to be working or not?
We have academic freedom, so half of us are using it a lot, and we're teaching our students about prompt engineering and these types of things. We have some stalwarts who are just, like you're saying, it's kind of a criminal activity to use it. But at our university level, they're saying it's up to each faculty, and each faculty is setting up their own rules. And I hate saying it, but my generation and up, more of my colleagues are against, especially in the law school, for another reason. But other faculties, and even in the business school, I've got some of my younger profs in my faculty, they're literally teaching how to use it well in wherever, they're more in digital space anyway. But that's what we're doing. Because the university just said, we're in Switzerland, so we're not going to get that encumbered with all legal battles. They just said that we're going to impose the right of academic freedom to choose as you want. But you have to be very explicit.
I think the challenge for us as a university is to it needs dramatic change, isn't it? In the idea of assessment, etc. So it's I think what we're trying to do is a lot of shoehorning solutions in, or keeping to old ideas of the stands of what and how assessment should look like, without really taking into account the kind of change AI brings to the table. And we were talking about this quite a lot with our faculty as well, and say, okay, what are we assessing, and how do we embrace AI? Because I think in our institution the idea is that we want to embrace AI, but we still struggle how we operationalize that embracement within AI, and then we keep coming back to, I think we need to start fresh from the sense of what's the value proposition that we're proposing if students have to use AI in the workplace. Does it really make sense to say you are allowed, but you're not allowed to go this far because of the kind of assessment I gave to you? What are the alternatives? So that's
A lot of faculty don't know how to use it at all. That's the problem. So
Yeah.
we even have students complaining that some faculty might be misusing it, setting up a rubric and then they're just letting AI do the first, let's say, I hate saying use the word grading, the first cut at the grading, so they get a feel for how everybody did. But it's, if they don't know what they're doing, I think part of the problem is if we're not training our faculty, they don't know what they don't know, and the power or potential. I'm a pro the power of it, and but then that comes back down to academic freedom. You can't make me use the tool if I don't want to.
Yeah.
So did any of the students mention that in your survey? They're afraid that the faculty don't know how to use it, but they are using it?
This specific type of feedback, I'm not sure. I'm sure that students sort of feel that because I imagine students are always the first ones to adapt to new technology, and there will be people they are working with who are like, do not be using any of these types of tools. I think the idea is we need to learn and have a set framework to what we consider misconduct. And I think for that we need to know what is important for this qualification, because the sheer production of words is not really a certification of quality skills. So what skills does this specific department qualification degree need, this specific module or assessment even? We can go as deep as the individual assessment, we should probably, and then really consider what skills do students need to demonstrate in order to pass this. And it probably shouldn't be they need to be able to write 3,500 words on this topic. It should probably be things like they need to be able to assess, they need to be able to critically think, they need to be able to formulate their opinion, they need to be able to understand certain things, and the way we then assess that would change. So it's just kind of like we need to be the first step is we need to be clear on what this qualification specifically needs, and then create assessments that will ensure that this is being assessed with the assessment that we're doing for that qualification. And I think because it's too easy to now let someone else or something else write a piece of paper, it can't be just that. That will be part of it, and we can use AI, for example, to maybe create an outline, maybe give me some inspiration, but then I need to put my own spin on it. The students still need to be able to write sentences, right? We don't want to go as far.
Is it the output that we are judging on? Because if we're saying use it half, but not completely, or have the two outputs and then do your own bit, is that what future employers want, or are they interested in the output? So, for example, if I now come up with an output and I used AI, are we judging the output, or are we judging, you know, the transcript between students and AI, for example, you know, to get to that output?
You have to.
Is it anything else, or do I, once I have the output, do I then maybe use AI? I know you won't like that, but maybe use AI to see how that compares to other students' output and who has the best outputs.
Yeah.
Having used it, you know, there are a million and two, but I haven't got the answers to it. It's just,
Yeah.
it always comes back to what does embracement of AI mean, and does it work to just say do bits of it but not all? So
It ultimately does.
Once we don't break that, and once we don't say, look, what does it really mean to embrace AI and allow it fully or not? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm running a 1-week MBA marketing communications course next week, okay? And I'm a baby boomer, right? So I'm up there in the age era code. And we'll be doing a huge amount of assessed work all through the week, of which they'll be doing different things with the instructions to use AI and not to use AI. So we start to see how they use their brains in terms of visualization, doing it purely themselves. And then we'll start to do it using prompt engineering, and then you start to see the comparisons between the two. I'm probably like everybody else, it's just self-taught, because like most institutions, we're also worried about assessment, but we don't see assessment as really being, in a sense, that's not the story. The story is actually being able to use it properly, and so on. I'm very relaxed about assessment. You can't police the stuff.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, what can we do about it? But I think you can use it in teaching in a hugely creative manner. And I think the problem is we're all being held back because we look at university policies, which, as people have said, are just put together by people who think I've got to put a policy together. Sometimes we just got to get on with it ourselves.
Yeah, I think one thing to bear in mind as well is it's almost like I had to do an accountancy class when I did my apprenticeship, and we had to manually do the books, and the claim was always, yeah, we have software that does it, but in case the computer doesn't work one day, you know how to do it manually, right? And I think it's almost the same thing that we now need to apply to generative AI. What really matters is what stays in the students' heads, right, without the use of AI, because we want them to leave education and their qualification knowing more than they did before. They can do an awful lot of research on things without attending classroom sessions and that kind of thing using ChatGPT, but what if that is going to stick? And what if that can they apply in their life and in their work life? And I think the skills is basically what they need to have without AI. They can build them using AI, but they should not rely on AI. So we can't run students off of AI. We need to have them use it to become who they are, but then be just as good without AI, maybe more effective and efficient with AI, but they still have the same skills. Like I, in my work, for example, use AI quite a lot, but in ways where I still know what I'm doing. But if I, for example, have a couple of thoughts, I need to write this email real quick, I say, can you make this sound a little more professional? I give it a few bullet points, and it's perfect. It's great, because that would potentially waste my time to learn more about the product, to learn more about the market. And these are the things that I have in my head. The things I'm telling you right now are unprepared. That's skills, right, that students need to have as well. I can look all of that up, I can prepare myself, but I need to have it up here, because otherwise it's not a skill. So I think that's basically what we need to bear in mind. We should all use it to prepare to learn, but ultimately we need it to stick to be a skill.